I bet you've never heard of awakening like this before. Hey guys, it is Ashley from theawakenstate.net, and we are back with our monthly episodes at Awaken and Manifest Your Best Life. So today I really wanted to talk a lot about the 5 key phases of the spiritual awakening journey. Now, I know we've talked about this before. I know there's been some key areas of like where people list like there's 21 stages, there's 30 stages, there's 6 stages, there's 3 stages. I just want to give you my personal interpretation of the 5 key phases that I see continuously since being on this journey over, 13 years now. And so what I wanted to do here is we're going to go a little bit differently, and I'm going to take you on an adventure. So let's get started. All right, we are back. So here's the thing. I don't know about you, but this has been the first episode I've done since after vacation. I'm a little bit whiny, I'm a little bit jittery, but we're just going to make the best of it and kind of just roll the dice here. So here's the thing. One thing that I don't know if you know about me is I'm a total fantasy nerd. And one thing that's come up continuously is I like to have visions. And visions are a part of how my intuition communicates to me. So a lot of the times when I have a particular download, it'll come through in the form of a really intense vision. It's kind of, it's not a hallucination. It's literally like in my head. And I just have this like sudden download of like, oh, this is exactly it. I have certain things like this come to me all the time. It's just one of my gifts. It's part of how my intuition likes to operate because I'm a very visual learner. One thing that came through is these 5 specific characters. When I say specific characters, I like to say archetypes. So if you're not familiar with the term archetype, it's more of like a persona and more of like a mythology of a certain like character. So these particular 5 characters started coming to me over the past year. And I began working with them in the Spiritual Awakening Roadmap. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend the Spiritual Awakening Roadmap because what we're going to talk about today is just a tiny taste of the deep dive I go into in the Spiritual Awakening Roadmap series. So I highly recommend you check that out at roadmap.theawakenstate.net so you can get the full gist of what we're about to talk about. But here's the thing. When it comes to looking at a call to adventure, I think it's important to emphasize that I'm a total fantasy nerd. So when I say we're going on an adventure, I mean we're going on an adventure. So when you think about how the 5 key phases of spiritual awakening are really come back to this core concept of these 5 characters. Now, these 5 characters help show us a story, and this story unfolds like a hero's journey. And this is where I originally got the idea, is the concept of the hero's journey is literally the epitome of what you see in movies, in books, in stories passed on from eons of time. The hero's journey is the spiritual awakening story. And so I thought it would be a really fun twist to create the hero's journey in relationship to spiritual awakening. And that's exactly what I did. So what are the 5 key phases of spiritual awakening? Now, before we dive into just that, I do want to say if you like our videos, please hit like, subscribe, and make sure that you stay notified. You can hit the notification bell and you'll be notified of every weekly new episode. Okay, so let's get started. When it comes to the 5 key phases, the number one thing I want you to remember here is everyone's different. Everyone has their own opinions about the 5 key phases. But for this particular thing, just have an open mind and let's explore as we go on a journey together. So for the first place of our journey, we start out with a call to adventure. And this is the soul wanderer. Now, if you've been here for many years, either on my channel or in my space, I'm sure you are familiar with the soul wanderer. The soul wanderer is the person who hasn't yet awakened. This person is unaware that they are going through a spiritual awakening. This phase of the soul wanderer knows that there's more to life. Maybe they've had a deep loss. Maybe they've had, they lost their job, or they lost a relationship, or they had a bad breakup, or maybe they suffered from bad trauma, or they had something happen to them that caused them to question. And it caused them to have a moment of, there is more to life than just this. There is something more here. And this call to adventure starts to happen. And what occurs in this particular stage is we have symptoms of awakening start to appear in our lives, but we don't fucking understand what is even going on. At the same time, we might be having psychic appearances where we have psychic phenomena start to happen. We might have random bouts of intuition show up. We might have deep philosophical questions like, am I real? Does reality exist? And so forth. The phase of the soul wanderer is they are bound to question, but they don't understand what is happening to them. And it makes them feel crazy. It makes them feel as if they are going on this wild adventure and they have so many questions that are burning at themselves, where they feel like they're crazy. They feel like they might be losing their mind. They're having symptoms show up. The ascension symptoms are starting to appear, but they don't even understand that they're experiencing them. At the same time, this person might identify as an empath, a Wiccan, a highly sensitive person. They might be identifying as someone who's sensitive, but not realizing that they're going through a spiritual awakening. This is very, very common to experience on the early stages of spiritual awakening. Now, when it comes to looking at the soul wanderer, we have to also look at the fact that the soul wanderer is lost. They're wandering. They are wandering from flower to flower, searching and lost and confused. But at the same time, they feel a deep calling for something more. And as these symptoms start to get bigger and bigger and show up more and more, to the point where you cannot deny them anymore, you cannot hide from them anymore, there comes a point in time where we start to experience, through either we find something online, or we just have a deep inner knowing, or inevitably what happens is we suddenly know in our core that we're having a spiritual awakening or a kundalini awakening. And this is where we enter the phase of the soul seeker. Now, the seeker is soul searching. They are searching because they have a spiritual awakening, but they don't know what the heck's going on. They're like confused. They're like, my entire world is flipping upside down. There's so many different things that are happening behind the scenes, where I'm having psychic abilities out of nowhere. I have very strong intuition, but I don't even realize what's occurring because I have like brief moments of intuition and so forth. So this element of the soul seeker is searching. And the soul seeker is very hungry. They're hungry for information. And so as they go on this soul searching journey, they are entering a space where they are refusing the call. And so they know that there is a call, but they're refusing the call. And this is where the symptoms start to get really loud and show up rapidly. And a lot of times it becomes hard to manage those symptoms. We have what we would call the ascension symptoms start to appear, but they are very overwhelming and taxing on the nervous system. And at the same time, it's almost like they're so hard to manage because of being in this space of the seeker. Now, at the same time, the soul seeker is soul searching. So this can translate to, you want to have like 20 different spiritual teachers, and you're trying to absorb a bunch of information. You're trying to figure things out. You're like looking at past life stuff. You're looking at Akashic records. You're dabbling in all sorts of different religion stuff. You might be dropping a religion or starting a new religion, or you might completely have a 360 when it comes to your sense of spiritual beliefs. And the soul seeker is literally trying to find their path. They're wondering, what is right? What is wrong? How do I manage these symptoms? How do I cope? How do I deal? And this energy of looking at the soul seeker is not just searching, but they are going to a point of awareness where I know in my core I'm having a spiritual awakening, but I have no clue what to do next. I have absolutely no clue. So they are refusing the call. All right. So when we think about how the soul seeker transitioned from the soul wanderer, we have this moment of awareness. Awareness is a key component when it comes to looking at who the seeker becomes, because we start to become more consciously aware that we are having a spiritual experience. We start to be more aware that we're having an awakening. We start to be more awakened to our kundalini rising, our consciousness, and so forth. And because of this complete 360 understanding of being the soul seeker, we start to realize that we must choose our path. And we begin to see that spiritual awakening is nothing more than this spiral of infinite choice, of looking at infinite ways of change and transformation and healing. And most importantly, we start to see that all of these changes are occurring from the inner to the outer level. And as a result, we're having a really hard time managing those symptoms. Then that moves on to our next phase of the journey, which is more common than you would think. But this is the part where a lot of us might be out of the questioning and the wandering and the soul seeking and the soul searching and trying to get all the spiritual teachers and all the spiritual info and all of that stuff. It becomes so overwhelming to the point where we decide, hey, I'm going to embrace my own path. I become the path walker. Now, in this phase, the path walker is all about choosing their path and walking their path. And they have known in their core what is their authentic path. They have reached a point of awareness where they are starting to have more of a connection to their higher self. They're starting to develop their intuition more. They're starting to focus more on their intuitive gifts and so forth. And you can start to see here in this particular energy of looking at our spiritual path, we all have different paths. And it's a beautiful way to look at the path walker, is realizing that there is no right or wrong path. It's more so about your waking up to your spiritual purpose, your spiritual path, and so forth. And this energy of being the path walker is about embracing, literally, your connection, your authentic connection to higher self. And when we look at higher self from this angle, we can see that choosing our path is all about spiritual practice, developing our relationship to higher self, and so forth. And so we've moved out of the stage of drastic questioning and drastic looking at all of these different teachers, and we have instead come inward into our personal teacher, our personal energy of looking at, we've stopped being so externally influenced, and now we're starting to tune back into ourselves, and the universe is even urging us to go inward. If you think about the times where it's like all of a sudden your friends fall away or old relationships fall away, and the universe is guiding you back within yourself to make sure that you are starting to develop your path and your truth and your authentic self. Okay. So are you with me so far? So on this beautiful journey, let's just do a recap. So we have the person who's unaware that they're spiritually awakening, but they feel the call. Then we have the soul seeker who is soul searching for their path. And this person knows that they are spiritually awakening, but they are lost and have so many questions. They are hungry for information, and they're caught up in the questioning phase where they can't help but question everything. Then we have the path walker, and the path walker's purpose is to develop their relationship to higher self. And this particular area of the journey, we see that we take that external influence and we start to move more inward into our personal journey. Now, this is where it gets really cool, because you can start to see how I'm not strictly defining things as, dark night of the soul and, going through identity crisis and so forth. I feel like it's so much deeper than that when you think about it as a spiritual concept, because through these characters, we can see that each of us have a different story, and that story unfolds in its set pathway due to opening up towards your pathway of experience. And that's one of the most beautiful things, like when it comes to spiritual awakening, is you can see that the path walker is different for all of us. And that's so beautiful. Now, moving on with our journey, as we become the path walker and we start working on our spiritual practice and developing our relationship to higher self, we start to come into the spiritual healer phase. And this is where we suddenly have the awareness that we need to heal. We know that everything that's coming up for us is coming up to be let go and released from our body. We know that everything that's arriving is like coming up into our face for a reason. And we fall down the trap of doing shadow work and only focusing on shadow work. Now, as the spiritual healer, this particular energy is about healing our past. And a lot of the times this surfaces because our higher self is trying to show off, this needs to be healed, this needs to be healed, this needs to be let go. And all of these symptoms start to appear for us. So in this direct correlation to being the path walker, because we went inward, we suddenly went inward and realized, holy shit, I got some stuff to clean up. And so we become in this energy of looking at, okay, how do I manage these symptoms? What do I need to heal? What can I let go? Where am I still stuck? And we start to look at our negative patterns. And I always like to say, in being the spiritual healer is most known for being conscious of our ego. We are now conscious of our ego stories, and we hate them. We don't like them. And we want to get rid of them. We want to change them. We want to transform them. And we see almost the error of our ways. We see our own karma, for example. And we know that we can do better. We know that we can embrace more alignment. We know we can embrace more of who we are on the other side of all the negativity and the drama and the toxicness and whatever. And this whole concept here of being the spiritual healer is we can see that we know in our core that it's about healing. And it's about healing that emotional wound, healing those emotional baggage, and so forth. And so in this particular area, we might have the dark night of the soul. We might have an identity crisis occur because the old self and the new self are wanting to be in a tug of war with each other. So because of this energy of looking at the past and wanting to be in the new energy, the new identity of who we are, the new paradigm self, we are completely like in a tug of war with who we desire to be. So there's a lot of trials and challenges and obstacles to overcome in this particular stage, because in this particular moment we are drawn to the obstacles, the problems, the fixating on the symptoms, the not knowing how to heal, and so forth. So in this particular stage, we might feel like it's a straight path, but it's not remotely a straight path. And it's more like a spiral in a forest and dragons and so forth. And there's a lot of obstacles to overcome on this journey. And because of that, we can see here that the spiritual healer is literally hiking up a mountain. They are working through their gunk. They are working through their past. They are learning that this is what needs to heal. This is what I need to do, and so forth. And a lot of this is about that ego death experience that most of us occur during spiritual awakening. Now, if you were to just think about it like this is actually really interesting, because not only are we conscious of the ego, but we know that we're at the point of ego death or identity crisis, which identity crisis leads to an ego death. And so when we look at this concept of being the spiritual healer as an archetype, we can see that when we embrace being the healer within, we start to have that ego death experience. And so this particular moment of clarity washes over us. And because of that, that's when we start to experience the oneness and the enlightenment and so forth, because we are moving on from the point of the dark night of the soul. We are moving on from the point of the identity crisis, and we are starting to embrace that ego death into the place of oneness and bliss and feeling one with the universe and all of that beautifulness of being on the other side, which feels like embracing more spiritual alignment. Okay, now to wrap this up, the fifth stage that we encounter is usually we have moved on from the healing and we embrace the space of being the master manifester. And the master manifester knows that all of this work was worth it because in the reality of it, I know that I'm a co-creator of reality. I know that I'm co-creating with my thoughts, my words, my actions, and my energy. And because of this ginormous leap of consciousness that has occurred throughout the entire journey, we now know that we can co-create our life. We can change things. We can be more conscious of our actions. We can make better choices. We can make better habits and so forth. And this is where we start to have more of those feelings of spiritual alignment. We start to have more emotional fulfillment. We start to experience the beyond the healing of the self. And I think this is also a very powerful point to recognize on the spiritual journey is there's a space within you that goes beyond the healed self. And the person who is on the other side of healing, the identity of you who's on the other side of healing is totally different than the you who was experiencing the identity crisis and going through ego death and so forth, because those two identities are completely different people. And when you think about it as a whole, the new paradigm self is the healed self. And that's not to say that healing is an ever evolving journey. We always go back to healing. I'm not saying that we're talking about like perfectionism here. I mean, in terms of knowing the manifested self, we have to basically go beyond the healed self into the space where we are embodying our higher self. And that's really what the master manifester is really about, is embodying our higher self and bringing that information, bringing those downloads into the earth plane. And so you can start to see here, this is a unique way to understand how we go through this journey of bringing spiritual awakening back to our daily life. And I think it's interesting because you can often get stuck in like just fixating on the dark night of the soul phase or the identity crisis phase or just even healing and shadow work. But that's not even the whole story. If you were to think about how it took me to go from being the soul wanderer all the way to the manifester, and this common thread that interweaves all of those things so that you remember your authentic self, the person who is the co-creator of their life. That is a totally different pathway than the person who was just wandering and felt the call. Now, this is the 5 key characters that I talk about in depth inside of the Spiritual Awakening Roadmap. And basically, I'd love to know when it comes to looking at these 5 phases. I know there's a lot of technicalities here. We can say, of course, but what about the integration phase? And what about that? I'm just thinking about in terms of those 5 core phases, where do you feel that you are most aligned? Where do you feel that you are most in resonance with? Because this will help you tremendously with making peace with where you are on your own path. And I think that alone is worth tenfold when it comes to understanding the journey. Because a lot of the times when we have a spiritual awakening, there's so many questions. We don't understand ourselves. We don't know what's happening to us. We feel crazy. We feel lost. We're lonely. There's no one to relate to. And all of these questions come up, and there's so many mysteries. Like, there was so many mysteries of like, what the heck is even happening? And I think because of creating this map, this layout for you, it gives you so much clarity and peace of mind to know that it's okay to be wherever you are. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's not about getting to the top of the mountain. It's not about going on a quest and we're all on different journeys so that there's a hierarchy. That's not what it's about. It's about understanding where you are on the pathway so that way you can know the right tools for yourself and that way you can have the right peace of mind. And so that's a lot what I talk a lot about within the Soul Aligned Life Academy, where we go in depth into this in the Kundalini Toolkit, which is our new bundle inside of the membership, where I talk about how we can take these archetypes and start to use them so that we can know not just the practices and the tools, but also to know what particular basically method can I use to help me heal in that particular phase of my life. And I think that is really powerful in a nutshell, because instead we're not just wandering aimlessly like the soul wanderer. We're allowing ourselves to know, okay, I am definitely the path walker right now. How can I work on my consistency? How can I work on developing my relationship to higher self, for example? And so we can start to see that there might be things that you need differently than the next person, but you're not getting it from a meditation practice, or you're not getting it from just doing healing work, for example. You know, if you want to work on your manifestation skills, then you need to work on manifestation, not healing work. If you want to work on understanding energy management and getting through, how to cope with spiritual awakening, you want to be working on energy management and understanding energy and mindfulness. And you might be totally different than the person who wants to work on manifestation. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think one of the most beautiful things that I love to talk on in our membership is there's nothing wrong with this, because we all have different ways of accessing this information of where we are on our own journey. So for example, a person who needs to study mindfulness might not be ready for manifestation yet, and there's nothing wrong with that. At the same time, a person who wants to work on their consistency to their spiritual practice might be totally different from the person who wants to work on energy management. These concepts are something that is not shared enough about, because instead we try to pigeonhole our spiritual practice, and then we also try to divert it to one thing or the other thing or the next thing. And it's like, sure, that works for some people, but it might not be what you need in your particular pathway of spiritual awakening, if you catch my drift. So if you want to learn more about this entire concept and this entire framework of the archetypes, I highly recommend either diving into the roadmap or learning about our monthly membership, which is the Soul Aligned Life Academy, where you receive monthly spiritual awakening bundles on a core topic. And we talk about all sorts of things related to spiritual alignment and spiritual growth to help you manage your own spiritual awakening more successfully. Okay. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you for tuning in and watching. And most importantly, if you are interested in the roadmap, it's roadmap.theawakenstate.net. And if you like our videos, please hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.